Our subject, Peggy Lee, stood alone as a true superstar in every sense of the word. Having made her mark as one of the most celebrated vocal stylists in American musical history, few other stars were so emulated, imitated, impersonated, and adored as Peggy Lee. Unlike most other singers of her generation, Sinatra, Bennett, Torme, Damone, she was born and raised far from the big city lights and the madding crowd. The serious little blonde was born Norma Dolores Eggstrom in the cold of Jamestown, North Dakota.
We didn't have electricity, for example. We had Benjamin Franklin stoves. I can relate to people of the age of 80, with as far as say equipment and how we lived. And we raised our own food. And although my father was a station agent, we still raised our own food and had a couple of cows and a few animals. I think I was sort of a strange child. I daydreamed a lot, and I imagine that is what sort of helped me through a lot of difficult times, because I had beautiful daydreams. They were great.
By the time you were 14, you had a pretty good idea that you wanted to be a singer, didn't you?
Yes, I was absolutely certain of it. It was a quiet kind of certainty. There's something told me that's how it would be.
And about this time, our little Swedish girl, who would eventually be a star, finally got out of Jamestown, North Dakota.
Then I went to Fargo, and Ken Kennedy, who is still one of my dearest friends, gave me the name Peggy Lee and put me on the air. He put me on the air rather soon after the audition, and within an hour or so. And the name Norma Eggstrom didn't sound right. Today it would sound all right. He said, "Let's see, you look like a Peggy. Peggy what? Peggy." And he tried a few names and came up with Lee, and that was really how it started. Within a matter of minutes, I had a new name, a new career, and I was very scared too.
Peggy Lee's first singing job in California came at the Jade Club on Hollywood Boulevard, $2 per night.
I couldn't believe I was in Hollywood, and I was underage, and fortunately no one asked me my age. It seemed to be one of those places where you could always get a job to kind of tide yourself over. I used to walk to work. I lived way off of Hollywood Boulevard, up on Argyle or something. Around in there. It looks so strange now. I can't find the house. That's gone too.
And while you were singing at the Jade Club, you were hit with a throat infection, and you decided to head back home to Hillsboro and subsequently Fargo, North Dakota for surgery.
They said I must have this surgery, and I wanted to go home. So I went back to North Dakota and got all over that.
And after a couple of years, Peggy Lee found a job in Minneapolis, Minnesota, including the chance to sing on various radio programs and audition for band leader Will Osborne. And then, after touring with the Will Osborne Band for about a year, Peggy Lee came west again, and this time you find yourself in Palm Springs, California, singing in a club called the Doll's House.
That was another stars hangout. Used to see Peter Lorre and Franchot Tone. I was a little starry-eyed still.
And finally, one night, one of the owners of the Ambassador Hotels in Chicago came in to watch this little starry-eyed singer from North Dakota named Peggy Lee. And he saw to it that you got a job in the buttery room of the Ambassador West in Chicago.
It was an intimate little room, very chic little room. And I sang there, and that's where I met Benny Goodman.
Benny Goodman was looking for a replacement for Helen Forrest, who was leaving his band. He heard about this little lady named Peggy Lee, and he came to see you sing one night at the Ambassador in Chicago. He liked what he saw, what he heard, called you the next day to offer you the job, and you didn't even return the call because you thought it was a put-on.
That's right. You have it right. And my roommate, she kept saying, "It was Benny Goodman." I said, "No, it wasn't Benny Goodman. He was in there, and the way he looked, he didn't like the way I sang, and I know it. So it couldn't have been him." But it was Benny. She finally convinced me to call, and he asked me to join them immediately. At the beginning, the critics were very much against me. I wanted to quit, but he wouldn't let me because some of the critics wrote, what's wrong with Benny's ear? Why did he hire this girl? And I thought it was terrible that he should be criticized. So I went to him and asked to leave, and he said, "No, I've heard what you can do." He said, "You're just a little scared. You'll be all right."
Do you remember your first recording session with Benny Goodman and what you recorded?
I remember it so well because, again, it was not only in the wrong key, but they played it too fast, and it was a terrible song. And the musicians wouldn't even speak to me because it was just awful. I think I can laugh at it now. It was called Elmer's Tune.
When you recorded Why Don't You Do Right with Benny Goodman, did Peggy Lee have any special feeling within her that said that record would eventually become a classic swing number, or was it just another record to you?
I had a lot of faith in the song. I didn't know about myself. I couldn't tell anything about the market or anything. In later years, I've had faith in certain songs that have become big hits, and some that I've had to really actually push to get them to be released. As a matter of fact, come to think of it, Why Don't You Do Right was almost shelved because Benny heard me singing it, and I played it so incessantly that he asked if I'd like to have an arrangement made of it, and I said I would, and he did, and it didn't make any huge impression on the audience there. And then there was going to be a recording band, so we recorded everything that he had in the books, and that was in the books. Then they released everything, and when they got down to the bottom of the barrel, there was Why Don't You Do Right, and it was an instant monster hit, and it stayed a hit. That song was way up in the top 10 for about 6 years or something like that.
How was Benny Goodman as a boss?
Benny was very strict, and I learned a great deal from him. He was very kind to me. He could be very rough with someone if he didn't like what they were doing. But I learned so much from him, and I learned the value of rehearsing and of having discipline in the orchestra. It's very important. I mean, you just can't fool around with that.
Peggy Lee, your marriage to guitarist Dave Barber around 1943 gave you a daughter named Nikki, and many of the best remembered Peggy Lee hits of that period, songs like that one, It's a Good Day, I Don't Know Enough About You, and of course, Mañana. When you look back at this time in your life, do these songs have any special significance or meaning?
Oh, no, Mañana, for example, was written right after David had been very ill, and we went down to Mexico to rest. And there was such a marvelous air of relaxing, and the attitude of the people was so relaxing that they weren't pressing for time. Mañana was soon enough, And that was really the inspiration for the song. Paid for the vacation.
One of my favorite Peggy Lee songs you co-wrote with the great Victor Young, Where Can I Go Without You?
That was one of the first things that I ever wrote with Victor. And at the time of his death, we were planning a whole musical based on a poem that I wrote that he scored for the symphony, and I recited at the Hollywood Bowl. And we were going to enlarge upon it and make it into something. He was doing the score for Around the World in 80 Days, if you recall. And that year, he received the Academy Award. It was a shame that he didn't receive it before because he was nominated over and over and over again. What a fine musician. Musicians had such respect for him. Always just. And some of the things that he wrote, like When I Fall in Love and My Foolish Heart. Victor wrote Golden Earrings. A lot of people think that I did, but because we were writing a lot of our things at that time, Dave and I were, and that was a a million something seller for me. So people associated with me, but actually Victor Young wrote the song. I didn't.
Do gold records really mean anything to you?
I like paintings better. So the gold records that I have requested that they do it in some other fashion. So I have some gold medallions and jewelry, actually, that's symbolic of the song. For instance, I have a whole flock of plaques and things in there that they're very nice. But, well, if you hang them up, I mean, it's pretty boring to look at them and saying, look what I did, look what I did, look what I did.
In 1944, Johnny Mercer and Glenn Wallachs were forming a new record company in Hollywood that they would call Capitol Records. And Peggy Lee would become one of their first recording stars. What do you remember, Peggy, about how you happened to join these two aspiring record moguls?
When I retired, I thought I was retiring from Benny Goodman's orchestra. And Dave and I were married, and I was going to just stay home and take care of Nikki. And they asked if I would come in and record a jazz album. And I thought, well, I could get a babysitter. That would be all right. And it was successful. So Capitol asked if I'd come in and if we would make some records.
And you enjoyed enormous success with Capitol through the late 40s and early 50s. And then you left and joined Decca Records for a period. I believe it was about 1952.
You know why I left? I had been experimenting with Lover, with the rhythm section on the road. And so the audience reacted so strongly to it that I wanted to record it, and Capitol didn't want to do it because they had some other very successful records of it. One of them being Les Paul and Mary Ford, I think was probably the most recent one they had at that time. My contract was up, and Sonny Burke came in with some people from Decca, Sonny Burke and Milt Gabler, and asked me if I was interested in going with Decca, and I said, yes, if you'll record Lover. You know, that arrangement, that orchestration of Gordon Jenkins is, I think, a classic, really. And during the recording of it, it was interesting that the musicians were so excited about the whole thing that they didn't even, when they were supposed to take 5, they wouldn't. They'd stay right in their chairs and run over little passages of it and so forth, you know. And the first day, we couldn't pick up my voice at all because the orchestra was so big. I left finally. Milt said, we just can't get it, Peggy. And then I said, oh. I went home and cried myself to sleep. And the phone rang, and it was Morty Palitz. God bless him. And he said, we've been working here with the head sound engineer, and we think we have the problem whipped if you will take the chance and do another session. And of course, by now that meant I could have hired a symphony, you know.
Yeah.
But I believed in it so strongly that I said, I really jumped at the chance. I said, of course. What time tomorrow? I'll be right there. And they were able to accomplish that. And as you know, you still play it. That's nice.
Influences in your life, Peggy Lee, from a singing standpoint. If I may, I'll throw you some names that I know affected your singing and singing style, and you give me your reactions, okay? First, a black singer of the 1930s, Maxine Sullivan.
Right. That Maxine really had a great effect on me. I used to listen to her. I think that was one of the first singers that I listened to.
How about Billie Holiday?
Yes, Billie Holiday, loved her work. She was a very sweet person. It's a very tragic life. I didn't see the movie, so I don't really know how it was depicted. But I did read a book that didn't sound too much like the truth.
Mildred Bailey.
Yes, Mildred Bailey. Bless her. She was some singer.
Well, we've talked about Maxine Sullivan, Billie Holiday, and Mildred Bailey as influences. Another was Bessie Smith.
I love Bessie's work. Of course, I never got to hear her in person or anything like that, but love her work. She had a profound influence on a lot of singers, I'm sure. Well, one much later, Janis Joplin.
And Peggy Lee, one more name that I know meant a great deal to you during those formative years, and a name that means so much to you today, a name that means so much to many people, Ella Fitzgerald.
Oh, yes, one of my dearest friends. She's really an all-time great. She's done so many magnificent things that anything you'd play of hers would make me happy.
So much for vocal influences, Peggy. You've been quoted time and time again that the biggest influence on your work has been your love and admiration for musicians. In fact, I think as a kid, you used to lie on your bedroom floor in North Dakota listening to Count Basie broadcasts from far away Kansas City.
That's right. Mm-hmm. It was one of his, well, couldn't have been one of his first orchestras, but it was, radio was very new to me. I mean, I lived in a part of the state, as I said, where we didn't have too much of the modern conveniences. And to think of this great band coming all the way from Kansas City to North Dakota, that's kind of amazing. Still is. And then when I finally met Count, I was so thrilled. And he kind of danced by the bandstand and gave me that big smile, and he said, "I think you got a little bit of Spade in you."
Do you think that's true?
Yes, I think that's true.
Peggy Lee's Fever. You have said that although that record was simple as far as the production was concerned, the production could be compared to a fine line drawing, and yet all you used on that were bass, drums, and some finger snapping.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of an interesting thing to me because that's how I wanted to do it. And the way that started was that I was singing some special lyrics, which were partly Sid Culler's and partly mine, and then of course partly the original song, which Max Bennett brought to me. I think that was Little Willie John's big hit, and I was just stomping my foot and snapping my finger and singing it these lyrics to Sammy, and he said, "I think you should do it just that way." And I said, "No, I would like to just add bass and drums, and that's all." And it won a Grammy Award. So actually, I wasn't credited with the arrangement, but we had put Jack Marshall's name on as he was the conductor at the session. And, well, I guess he probably put the bass line down. No, I don't remember that. It was Joe Mondragon played bass, Shelley Mann played drums, and I don't know, I can't remember who did the finger snapping.
It wasn't you, though.
No, I didn't dare, because it would have been would have interfered with my vocal performance.
Peggy Lee, you have called your home a musical house, and obviously that's one of the reasons you're able to stay on top of the changes, the different trends that continue to take place in the music business. When you refer to this home as a musical home, what do you mean literally?
It feels musical to me because it's very arty. And also there's a lot of nature when you look outside. It's sort of with those hanging plants, and then you look a little further and see the garden, and so that you get the feeling of being outside and inside. But then tomorrow, this whole room will be filled with musicians, and we'll be rehearsing for Florida.
Peggy Lee, you've recorded many of the songs written by today's contemporary writers like Chris Christopherson, Randy Newman, George Harrison, and, of course, Paul McCartney. You worked very closely with Paul, who said he always wanted to do a session with Peggy Lee, and then, of course, came the song he wrote for you, Let's Love. How was your meeting with Paul that first time in London? I think the session was called the Peg and Paul Show.
Well, amazingly, it was as though we had always known each other. There was no, it was a very comfortable kind of a thing. We had dinner Linda and he came over for dinner. I was at the Dorchester in London, and I didn't expect that I would be able to see them as quickly as I did. They came right over that same night, and I think it was the same night that I called them, and it was just delightful. We just talked about music and everything, and that's when he told me that he was writing a song for me, and he'd almost finished it. And I was so thrilled because, I mean, I had no idea that he was going to do that. But he said, later on, he said that was instead of champagne or flowers. Very professional, very pleasant. I have such enormous respect for him.
Peggy Lee is one of those rare performers who's been able to watch her audience change with the times. In other words, her ability to sing the songs that are happening now, whenever now happens to be. This has enabled your audience to change with you, Peggy, and this must be a delightful feeling to realize and appeal to most every age group.
That is a good feeling because the younger people hear the older music and are surprised that they like it. Surprised sometimes. And the same thing happens with the older part of the audience who hear the contemporary things and like them. I did one thing that may have been a mistake, but on the other hand, I don't know whether I would change it at all. But I did a lot of the things that I now hear other performers just beginning to sing. And I have done them, years back already, 4 or 5 years ago or something like that. So that they are now old to me, those songs.
Peggy Lee, another record, which again shows that you are at home with any and every type of song. A song that won a Grammy for Best Contemporary Vocalist of 1970. A song that was one of the top 5 records of the year. Peggy Lee's Is That All There Is?
A lot of people think that I wrote the song, and a lot of people think that it was written for me, and neither is true. It was written by Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, and it was written originally, I think, for Ship of Fools, but it wasn't used, and they brought that along with something else that they wanted me to sing, and I wouldn't do it. I didn't want the other song, and I said, I want this song. Well, they said, okay, if you do. And I didn't know it, but Leslie Uggams had recorded it about 6 months before that in an album, which wouldn't have made any difference anyway, but I had a whole different conception of it anyway, because it took me quite a while to decide whether to sing it, because it wouldn't leave me alone. It was a haunting kind of thing, and was so controversial in my own mind. And it began to be, finally I understood it as a riddle song, because it is the way you take it. I got tons of mail on it from people, and it was used as the subject of many sermons in churches by all different faiths. It was written up in all kinds of. It was written up. There was a half a page about it in the Catholic newspaper. I understand Billy Graham used it as subject of a sermon, and all of the clergy took the positive meaning, as I had. They understood that, which was interesting to me, because there were about, I'd say 5% of the people who thought that it was cynical, and they were against it. And like, is that all there is?
Your portrayal of an alcoholic blues singer in the film Pete Kelly's Blues a few years back won several awards for you, as well as an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. Apparently, you didn't pursue your work in films, and yet more recently, you were quite interested, I know, in perhaps producing the life story of Claude Debussy. Is that still an interest to you, or has that fallen by the wayside?
No, it's still an interest, but I lost the rights on the novel Clair de Lune because I had not completed the script at a specified time, and the writer didn't allow me to continue. And but I still, because while I was doing it, I was doing research on the side, just on the life of Claude Debussy. and found a lot of things that were not in the book, because this was a novel based on the life of, and beautifully written book. Same man who wrote Moulin Rouge, Pierre Lemire.
Mm-hmm.
And but I found so many things of interest in the in his life that, and I'm still looking. So it's going to take a long time, but I am going to do a story.
One of the dozens of albums we have in the library with Peggy Lee's name on the cover is the one you did live at the Basin Street East in New York. You first played there, I believe, in March of 1960, right after they opened. And then you went back there for a return engagement in the winter of 1961, and despite the worst snowstorms to hit New York since 1947, you packed the place every night, while clubs in other parts of New York were going down the tubes. And the album from that engagement is exciting, and again, that had to be a club date that stands out in your mind. Am I right?
Oh, it was so thrilling, really. It was, people lined up 4 abreast or more around the block, and they would stand there for the longest time and wait through one show for the next one. And some of my friends said that they had as much trouble getting out as they had getting in. No, it really was thrilling, and that snowstorm thing was exciting because it was declared an emergency situation, and people rented sleds, and then some of them walked from as far as Times Square over to Basin Street East, which is near the Waldorf, and that's a long ways.
I can see sleds replacing taxi cabs in New York.
I made the mistake of going out and kissing one of the horses' nose, and I got a terrible sore throat.
Which is bad for a singer.
Yes. I don't know about the horse, but that would be a much longer throat to be sore, but I don't think I hurt the horse.
We'd be remiss if we didn't ask about other interests besides those of a musical nature. Your beautiful art collection is obvious as one visits your home, and Peggy Lee is quite an accomplished artist, I must say, and you collect rare books.
Yes.
Did you develop your interest in painting and art, or is this an interest that dates back to childhood?
No, I can't remember. I didn't really start painting. Writing poetry was something that I did when I was little, but it was probably terrible. Painting really is maybe 20 years ago or something like that. Started just fooling around with it. But what I really want to do someday is work with, I'd like to do some sculpting, because I've worked with a little clay, and I've had a very good time with it.
Peggy, without embarrassing you, is one of a half a dozen or so premier entertainers who's looked upon as being truly one of the great singers, compared by your peers and audience with a Sinatra, an Ella, Bennett, a Nat Cole, a Streisand. You must feel a great deal of satisfaction and pride when you survey a career that has enabled you to stay in step with the times and be accepted by such a wide and varying public. It must be a great feeling of satisfaction to you.
I would say that it's more one of gratitude, really, because it's very nice to be accepted.
Especially by peers.
And by audiences, too.
Just for the fun of it, I'd like to throw you some various names from show business and get your reaction, whatever comes to your mind when I throw you that name, okay? Let's begin with one of your very close friends for a long time, George Shearing.
Marvelous. Worked with him doing that album. He's so sensitive and so absolutely right.
Another arranger, composer that you admire greatly, Quincy Jones.
Quincy is brilliant, brilliant. And he's still, God bless him, he came through that tremendous illness. And I'm so happy that he's having such great success with his albums.
How about this name, a new name in music, Frank Sinatra?
Well, who doesn't adore Frank Sinatra? I do. He used to be my neighbor, too. And he's a very nice neighbor. Very kind, very thoughtful. I remember once when he was my neighbor, I was ailing for a while, and so on his way down the hill to see his family, And he always had such an interest in his family. That's always pleased me. He would stop by and bring something like an album or some flowers or a book or some nice thing, you know.
One more name for you. All inclusive. What do you think of the Beatles?
I think they've had such, well, undoubtedly the biggest influence on music that I can think of since Johann Strauss did those funny waltzes.
Peggy, this has been delightful for me, and I'd like to wrap all this up with a couple of quotes, if I may. Critic Leonard Feather has said, "If you don't feel a thrill when Peggy Lee sings, you're dead, Jack." And a writer for Entertainment World once said, "Everybody doesn't like something, but nobody doesn't like Peggy Lee, the performer and the person." And I think that says it all. Thank you for allowing us to visit with you in your home and share these minutes with Peggy Lee, truly a natural woman.
Thank you, Wink. Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed the entire time we spent together.